coming up on The World today. Ukrainian officials cheer apparent attacks on military bases in Russian-annexed Crimea, warning civilians to stay away from potential targets. Also, the United States and Europe weather drought, flood and wildfires affecting the U.S. and Europe as weather agencies continue to warn of high risks in the areas. Plus, Kenya's President-elect William Ruto makes first comments since his main rival, Raila Odinga, rejected the results. We begin with news just in. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who has arrived in Lviv ahead of his meetings with the leaders of Ukraine and Turkey. According to a UN previous announcement, Mr. Guterres will on Thursday attend to bilateral issues and will travel to Odesa on Friday to discuss the grain deal. Mr. Guterres will hold a trilateral meeting with Ukrainian leaders, Turkish presidents to discuss the inner workings of the Black Sea grain deal. The UN said he also plans to hold a bilateral meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. In July, Ukraine and Russia agreed to a deal brokered by the United Nations and Turkey to allow the resumption of vital grain exports from Ukrainian Black Sea ports. Mr. Guterres will travel to Istanbul on Saturday. His spokesperson also said the Russians are aware of the Secretary-General's plans. Ukraine's defense intelligence has hinted the start of a long-awaited and touted counteroffensive to retake territory lost to Russia could be starting soon. Its spokesperson in a televised address today said in the near future there will be very acute events on the entire front. According to Andriy Yuzov, a spokesperson for the defense intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, he says this is not about binding to any date. However, we have to consider the factor of the Independence Day of Ukraine. He was referenced in the country's Independence Day on August the 24th. Russian forces have continued to attack multiple Ukrainian military targets with high-precision weapons. This is according to the Russian defense military, while Ukraine said that its armed forces had repelled Russian attack in several directions. Russian Defense Ministry also said that in their daily news release that the Russian aerospace forces used high-precision weapons to hit the command and observation posts of the 3rd Battalion of the 46th Air Mobility Brigade of the Ukrainian Army in Kherson Oblast, as well as a temporary deployment point of the brigade. The Russian forces also carried out concentrated strike on the positions of the Ukrainian 72nd Motorized Infantry Brigade in the Donetsk region. In a Ukrainian position in Donetsk, the Russian forces found some French-made anti-tank mines. The General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces said on the same day that the Ukrainian forces repelled the Russian attack in the directions of Sivyansk, Kramatorsk and Bakhmut, while the fighting in the direction of Avdiivka and Zaporizhzhia was still in progress. The Russian side also said that the Ukrainian Armed Forces shelled the city of Enodoha. This is on Tuesday, where the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is located. The Russian side said the move aimed to provoke a Russian counterattack. The Ukrainian side reports are saying that Ukraine has taken responsibility for this, but the Ukrainian State Nuclear Power Corporation said that as of yesterday morning, the excessive radiation and fire safety risks of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant had not been eliminated. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that various reasons could be behind Russian-annexed Crimea's explosions and warned people in occupied territories to stay away from Russian military sites. Moscow denounced sabotage, and Ukraine hinted at responsibility for the explosions at the military base that is an important supply line for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The blasts engulfed an ammunition depot at a military base, the north of Crimean Peninsula, disrupting trains, forcing the evacuation of over 2,000 people from a nearby village. The explosions raised the prospect of new dynamics in the 6-month-old war if Ukraine now has capability to strike deeper into Russian territory, or pro-Kyiv groups if they're having success with guerrilla-style attacks. The president also asked people in the region to be careful.
Причини вибухів на окупованій території можуть бути різні, дуже різні, в тому числі, цитую,
The reasons for the explosions in the occupied territory can be different, very different. In particular, I quote the definition of the occupiers themselves, Головотяцького. But all of them bear the same sense: the destruction of the occupiers' logistics, the ammunition, military and other equipment, and commanders' posts save the lives of our people. The fewer opportunities the occupiers have to spread evil and kill Ukrainians, the sooner we'll be able to end this war by liberating our land. And the cue to leave Crimea for Russia and cross the bridge these days proves that the absolute majority of citizens of the terrorist state already understand, or at least still feel, that Crimea is not a place for them. Because the leadership of Russia expects that Ukrainians, Europeans, and the whole world will feel tired from this war, we therefore must do everything so that it is not us or our friends and partners who get tired, but our enemy. Today, the Russian army continued its absolutely senseless and brutal shelling of the cities of the Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk region. Unfortunately, they are victims. Shelling of Kharkiv and the border area continues, but all of this gives nothing to the occupiers, and it won't break our resistance.
Російської армії і усіх тих місць, де вони зберігають боєприпаси і техніку, де тримають свої штаби. Російська армія цієї доби продовжила абсолютно безглузді, жорстокі обстріли міст.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's State Emergency Service have released a video today showing the aftermath of a Russian missile strike 60 kilometers south of Odesa in the coastal town of Zatoka. Ukraine's State Emergency Service said in a Facebook post that the strike left 4 people wounded, caused fire, severe damages in one of the town's resorts. The railway bridge in Zatoka is a key connection between Odesa region south to the rest of Ukraine and has been targeted during the war several times before. Elsewhere in Mykolaiv, the city's mayor reported Russian missiles hitting the south Ukrainian frontline city early this morning. According to Mayor Oleksandr Senkevich, 2 C-300 rockets hit Petromoila Black Sea National University, leaving no casualties. The strike damaged walls, doors, university interiors, broke many windows. The director of the Black Sea National University said the university was ready for the attack as he walked on broken glass in one of the university's damaged halls. As the Russian invasion of Ukraine entered its 175th day, VOA's Anna Chernikova joins us now for more on the situation on ground. Hello, Anna. It's nice to see you. Let's begin with the shelling in Crimea. What's really going on there? And is it Ukraine that's causing it?
Good evening. Well, the situation in Crimea is definitely a very positive sign for Ukraine in this war. Ukrainian authorities gave a lot of hints that Ukraine is involved, and they do not confirm this directly, so we don't have any direct confirmation or any announcement, official announcement, but we hear a lot of hints, and of course we realize that this is something specific that Ukraine would probably be interested in. According to CNN and to the New York Times, and according to their anonymous sources, they are claiming they have anonymous sources in the Ukrainian authorities, within the Ukrainian authorities. They say that they actually have confirmation that Ukraine is involved. It looks like this. Ukrainian authorities give hints on that, particularly President Zelensky and head of President Office, Mr. Yermak, also said in his latest announcement that Ukraine definitely consider Crimea as its territory, and that Ukrainian armed forces will continue their job until all territories, occupied territories, are liberated. So what we know, particularly from what happened in Crimea, so attacks and explosions happened in 3 main air bases, airfields, and these airfields are pretty much very deeply involved in the Russian offensive on the southern part of Ukraine. Particularly yesterday, what happened in Jankoy and next to Simferopol, in Simferopol area. According to British intelligence, these 2 air bases are the main and the key for Russian offensive on the southern of Ukraine, and this definitely makes Russia very nervous and makes Russia very uncertain about the safety of Crimea, because Russia is saying and announcing that Crimea is a pretty much safe place, but now we can see that it's not that safe as Russian officials are trying to put it. So this is what we have for the moment, and we also know that quite a lot of equipment was destroyed and quite a lot of military
Weapons,
equipment and
ammunition,
military
yes.
Explosive were destroyed. So of course it was quite if it's Ukraine, it was quite a successful actions.
And Anna, perhaps away from that, while we, watch closely what happens in Crimea, because we understand people are also leaving that area. We were all excited hearing the first grain shipments left Odesa under the deal brokered by the UN. We understand the UN Secretary General has landed Lviv, and then this deal was also done with Turkey. But now we're hearing it appears to have ended up in Syria. Because, during the last visit, Putin and the president of Syria, we understood that Syria said it was cutting ties with Ukraine. So what are we missing?
Well, what we know about this particular ship, that it was supposed to bring Ukrainian grain to Lebanon, but Lebanon refused to receive it due to the, as they said, because of the dates of delivery were late. So what we know that part of this grain came to Turkey, and it was actually it was basically left in Turkey, part of the grain, and then according to the map, according to the official reports, it was supposed to go to Egypt. However, we know that at certain point, as we can see with the coordinates that the ship was providing, the last coordinates available were in the waters of Cyprus, and then the ship. So the coordinates were not available, and then we can see from the satellites that ship is in Syria. We don't have any official comments on that from the Ukrainian side, from any side actually, so it might come later on. We will see, but what I can say is that definitely it was not openly planned, at least, so it was supposed to be in Lebanon, and then it was supposed to be in Egypt. So we will see what official comment would be and how it will end up. But of course, it looks very it looks unexpectedly, because definitely Syria was not the final destination for this grain, as it was mentioned in the official records.
All right, and Anna, we've been hearing Washington, D.C.-based Institute for the Study of War said that Russia has launched offensive operations in and around the Donetsk region in recent days. What can you tell us as to what Russia controls at the moment?
Situation in the front line hasn't really significantly changed. So if we talk about Donbas, we know that Russian forces had certain advances, not much, but in some areas, similarly to Ukrainian forces. So very heavy battles are going on in this very minute as well. We know that Pisky region and Bakhmut region, these two regions are under the most heavy fightings for the moment. We hear a lot of reports that Russian forces are shelling residential areas, and residential areas are under constant fire, as well as civilian infrastructure and military infrastructure. Today, for instance, in one of the settlements in Donetsk region, Russian forces hit the village, and with only one hit, 10 houses were destroyed, and it was quite a bad hit. But for the moment, we have confirmation that no victims are in place. Hopefully, there are not going to be any, but again, numbers could change. If we look down to the south, we can see that Kherson region is definitely where the second main front line is lying, and Ukrainian forces have quite a lot of success there. Again, counteroffensive actions are going on. We hear a lot about the damages that Ukrainian forces are doing, and we hear that a lot of Russian bases are destroyed by Ukrainian forces, both in Kherson region and in Zaporizhia region. So, for example, today, Novakhovka, which is in Kherson region under occupation, there we heard about heavy explosions, and we know that the Russian base was destroyed. Similarly, in Melitopol, a huge explosion happened, and for the moment we don't have precise details, but it looks like damages are also in place and casualties probably as well. And similar situation in Luhansk region. If we look at the official reports, it was a report of by the head of military administration of Luhansk region that Ukrainian forces destroyed a base, and at least 100 Russian soldiers were killed. But again, numbers could change, and more details could come soon.
Anna, we appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. VOA's Anna Chernikova joining us from Kyiv. As German residents worry about rising energy costs and supply shortages, one village in Mecklenburg, Western Pomerania, is finding its own solutions to climate change and effects of the Ukraine crisis. With wood on their doorstep and the initiative of forest owner Heine von der Ostensacken, many of the local residents joined a local heating network that runs off spare wood chips. And a descendant of the Baltic noble family has offered all neighboring households the option to connect to his wood chip heating system, and almost all of them have accepted the offer. He says that he has enough wood to spare on his 150 hectares, as the branches of the treetops have no economic use and can be spread. Some of the trees need to be felled as they have become rotten. Others fell in a recent storm. The wood chips can be created directly on site, while the thick trunks have to be transported to a large stationary chipper.
Aufgeschichtet, das wird gehackt und dann in die Holzhackschnitzelheizung als.
And Finnish Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto has said that the Finnish decision to slash the number of visas issued to Russians could increase pressure for a common European Union visa policy. Finland announced yesterday it will reduce the number of visas issued to Russians from September 1, cutting daily visa application appointments in Russia from 1,000 to 500 per day, with just 100 collected to tourists. Minister Haavisto said at a news conference with his Estonian counterpart, Umaris Reinsalu, adding that the issue would be discussed at an upcoming informal meeting of EU foreign ministers at the end of the month. With European airspace shut to Russians, many have been travelling through bordering Baltic countries and Finland in order to fly to other parts of Europe on Schengen visas. The visas allow 90 days of travel within the 26-country border-free Schengen area. Well, still to come on the program, we'll be talking with an immigration lawyer to make a sense of what this means, banning travel, or restricting travel for those coming from Russia through Europe for tourism. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Still on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but perhaps away from the security and political aspect of the conflict to the immigration debacle as a result of the invasion. Immigration lawyer Dayo Fadina joins me now from the UK. Thank you for joining me on the program. What do you make of the proposed restrictions, or is a ban of most Russians entering other EU countries like Estonia tomorrow? They plan to cut off a popular route into Europe's passport-free Schengen zone. The other culprits in this case are Latvia, Lithuania, and the Czech Republic.
Oh, good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers. Well, what's been introduced at this point regarding the ban on the visiting visas for anybody coming from Russia into any part of Europe, that's the case that's going to be happening, and that's what we have on ground right now. And what's going to be happening is, I think the Europeans are now trying, particularly Western Europe, is now trying to ban Russian tourists and immigrants going to any of the Western European countries because of the war in Russia. And they are doing this because they are of the strong opinion that if this war has continued for the last 4 or 5 months, Russians cannot continue to take the benefit of traveling to other parts of Europe, whilst Russia has invaded an independent country and caused so many stress and trouble for many of these citizens. So indeed, Estonia, and I should think Finland and Latvia are the major countries actually agitating for this very particular ban. Whether it would go ahead with the other European countries is yet to be seen, because you would need the block approval of about 27 countries within the EU for that to be able to happen. But other countries are seriously thinking about doing this.
But for some of the countries that have talked about it and have started it limiting the number, is that even legal? Because, there's also families who live in other European countries who are Russians. You're saying their families won't be able to see each other. And should Russian citizens be made responsible for the government's actions, their government's actions?
No, not at all. I think it's I won't say it's quite illegal, but it's not proper and lawful at all for this to be happening. The majority of Russians did not sign up to this very particular war. They cannot be held responsible for what's happening in between Russia and Ukraine at this point. In fact, you have a major opposition in Russia against this very particular war. So for all Russians to be punished for something that the majority of them are not particularly, agreeable to, is not right at all. Yes, they have family, families, living in many of these European countries. They should have the right to at least be able to apply for a visa to visit their families and friends in these European countries. But unfortunately, I think this war has become so entrenched and so bad to a point where Western countries are now want to start picking out ordinary Russians who do not really have much to do with this war. There are so many of them, so many Russians who even don't want this war, and punishing them is not right. I think what they could be doing, what the European countries should be looking at doing, is possibly giving conditions giving conditions for any Russian who applies for a visa to come to any of the European countries. There could be a fee you need a fee for possibly reconstruction of Ukraine if that war should end, or there could be a situation whereby a statement could be made by any Russian who wants to apply for a visa to go to any of the European countries that he or she does not agree with the war. I mean, there are so many things that the European countries could be looking at instead of this outright ban. It's not particularly legal, to be honest with you. And I feel that it might not even run at all because there are so many Russians, particularly the so-called wealthy. They would always find a way around this ban, by applying for other, national. I think, for instance, Turkish passports or Turkish papers to be able to get into Europe. It's only the ones that do not have the means to be able to do so that would suffer very, very badly.
And Mr. Fadana, also, Russia could respond based on all of these decisions and whatever future decisions the EU bloc would decide. Summarily, tell us, in a minute or two, how could this go?
Well, the Russians could actually respond accordingly by banning all other European countries coming to their country too, by not actually giving them visas to come to their country. But I don't think that would really matter, because there are so many Europeans who do not actually go to, who have stopped going to Russia because of this Russia-Ukrainian war. And they're of the opinion that, well, there's no point in us actually going out there. And what Russia could also do is Russia could actually now, because of the fact that you are dealing with a dictatorship in Russia, the anger of the government could also tell on many people within the government who could say, well, the best way to retaliate regarding this is to actually make them understand the fact that you cannot ban Russians, that we are going to be retaliating in a different way, which would be very, very terrible. Because this war has been going on for a while. It's yet to end. It will not end for quite a while. And my fear is this war could actually get to a point where thousands of other people will be dying. Half of the country has been destroyed. So pushing Russia to that point where they may want to actually continue with the war and to continue to create damage to Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine particularly, it won't go well for anybody, both in Europe and all over the world. If this war should escalate to a point of no return.
We appreciate your time. Many thanks, immigration lawyer Mr. Dayo Fadana. Thank you for joining me on the program.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's head on to politics in the United States. As Liz Cheney, you remember her, fierce Republican critic of former U.S. President Donald Trump, who played a prominent role in the congressional probe of the assault on the Capitol, January 6, 2021. She lost her seat to Trump-backed primary challenger in Wyoming, Harriet Hageman. With 99% of expected ballots counted in the area, Hageman led the Republican field with 66.3% of the vote, followed by Cheney with 28.9%. According to election monitoring firm Edison Research. In her victory speech, Hageman criticized Cheney, reminding her that she answers to the people of Wyoming. Well, Cheney herself conceded defeat. The 56-year-old daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney has held the seat since 2017, but attracted Trump's anger after voting for his impeachment last year and playing a leading role on the committee investigating the January 6, 2021 assault on the U.S. Capitol. During her concession speech, she focused on the importance of honoring the democratic process of the country.
Honorably, the outcome of elections. It was 73% of the vote. I could easily have done the same again. The path was clear. But it would have required that I go along with President Trump's lie about the 2020 election. It would have required that I enable his ongoing efforts to unravel our democratic system and attack the foundations of our republic. That was a path I could not and would not take. No House seat, no office in this land is more important than the principles that we are all sworn to protect. And I well understood the potential political consequences of abiding by my duty. Our republic relies upon the goodwill of all candidates for office to accept honorably the outcome of elections. And tonight, Harriet Hageman has received the most votes in this primary. She won. I called her to concede the race. This primary election is over, but now the real work begins. It has been said that the long arc of history bends toward justice and freedom. That's true, but only if we make it bend. Today,
Well, just to remind you, there were 10 Republicans who voted to impeach former U.S. President Donald Trump over the U.S. Capitol attack January 6th, and most of them will be on the ballot in November. Of the 10, 4 lost primaries, 4 decided not to run for re-election, and 2 survived. Also losing alongside Liz Cheney is Peter Mayer in Michigan. He was defeated by Trump-backed John Gibbs. He has been vocal in his criticism of former president. Other Republicans whose names will be on the ballot are Jamie Herrera, Butler, Dan Newhouse, both of Washington, Tom Rice of South Carolina, David Valado of California, Adam Kissinger of Illinois, Anthony Gonzalez of Ohio, Fred Upton of Michigan, and John Katko of New York. Let's bring in our analyst now, Foreign Affairs commentator Calvin Dark, a friend of the House. He joins me from Washington, and Foreign Affairs and Strategy analyst Adam Roosevelt in Dubai. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me on the program.
Good to be here.
Let's begin with you, Calvin. Liz Cheney lost in Wyoming. We know this is backlash for her voting for former President Trump's impeachment in Congress. She's also chair of the committee investigating the attack on the Capitol. Will this affect her role and the job of the committee going forward?
I think this loss actually will magnify her role on this committee, because normally if you have a sitting member of Congress that loses in a primary, you know, they become what we call a lame duck, and they don't have much influence. In Cheney's case, because she made her case last night that she has one mission now that she lost re-election, and that is to make sure that Trump doesn't get in the Oval Office, she has the biggest possible congressional megaphone with the committee to, you know, continue to have the hearings, hear the testimonies, and then, of course, the report that we're all anxious to see before this year ends. So I think in this situation, it amplifies her position and the megaphone that she has.
Adam, do you also agree with Calvin on this?
Well, I think he's made some interesting points. I would say that from a procedural perspective, the committee has already defined how they would investigate President Trump, looking into what he may have been involved in to incite the violence. But they'd also be collaborating with the FBI and other government organizations. I don't believe that Cheney, as the vice chair, being removed from her congressional seat will have a significant impact, primarily because the procedure is already set in terms of what the committee's powers will allow in terms of this investigation, and what is already moving forward in motion will effectively define the outcome specifically. Not one person will really be the champion, so to speak, but they will all have individual personalities in this process. But the committee as a body is the deciding procedural entity.
But perhaps to you, Adam, she's still in the Republican Party. She's promised to continue to fight against Trump's influence on the party. Could that be detrimental to her remaining in the party or playing any other leading role there?
Well, I think we can all agree that Congresswoman Cheney is in the minority, but there is a lot of power still within the Cheney family in terms of working behind the scenes to fund and build coalitions that would fund positions against the president. Now, she has been identified as a rhino. You know, Republican in name only is the definition of this term, but there's still a lot of strategic tools that the Cheney family has developed over the years. Most people don't know and don't see those type of tools deployed behind the scenes, but I will tell you that money also is an influencing factor. Cheney family is still very strong in the business community. I do think that they can join forces with the Democratic Party covertly and still have some small support from the Republican parties who are dissidents. But I think that they have a lot of power because the Democrats are standing behind this investigation and going after Trump.
And to you, Calvin, the November polls are only a little more than a couple of months away. These 10 Republicans who sided against Trump, most of them will likely lose their seats. How do you predict that will reflect on the midterms, and will it also affect how much President Biden is able to achieve in the remaining 2 years?
Well, as far as how it will affect Biden's agenda, I don't think it'll have that much of effect, not having these Republicans that voted against Trump, just because it's going to depend on whether or not Democrats can retain control of the House and Senate. Now, one way that it may have an effect is these very pro-Trump voices that are going to be replacing a lot of these members of Congress can make a lot of noise. That's a lot bigger than the vote or the committee assignments that they get. So I think from a public relations standpoint, it's going to be more difficult for Biden, but practically it's going to depend on whether or not the Democrats, Republicans win in the midterms with the control of the House and Senate.
Adam, what are your predictions for the midterms?
Well, this is my favorite question of today, and I will tell you that President Biden has been in office just a little bit under 2 years. And now we've got major topics surrounding the globe, Russia-Ukraine war, also the Afghanistan withdrawal, increasing inflation, all these different things in terms of taxing the middle class. These are now becoming some of the biggest issues that will really be the deciding factor once you aggregate Biden's performance, whether or not he has a strong chance in 2024. So I think right now, America's being viewed as we've lost our position in peace and security. Biden will have to work with his administration to rebuild that positive image. But right now, I would say that America is in a different position negatively before the Biden administration won the election. And now he's being judged on so many factors domestically and from a foreign policy perspective.
Perhaps, Adam, to you, would you say that Trump is the strongest Republican candidate to be ever fielded?
I can't say definitively that Trump is the strongest candidate to be ever fielded. I think it's a combination of what you see. There's a lot of great leaders in the Republican Party that bring forth all different types of diverse backgrounds, from a business perspective, from youth engagement to public policy. I just think that right now Trump is the leader of the Republican Party. He's the loudest person you'll probably see. And I think he has the capability to use the megaphone to be the loudest Republican for another decade. And I don't see many people competing because he does have the engine behind him to continue leading and take full control of the Republican Party, which he maintains.
Calvin, your idea of former President Trump?
Well, I think that he definitely is the loudest in the Republican Party and will definitely win the primary. Now, whether he's the best, that definitely remains to be seen. But when it comes to Biden, as you were mentioning, I really hope that in the midterms, Biden is judged on his record when voters think about the fact that we now have legislation that improves health care, lowers prescription drugs, cleans up the environment in a way that we never have. We have gun reform that we never thought was possible. Inflation's going down. So I think that President Biden and the Democrats do have a strong case to make. And I think that, combined with the fact that the Republicans are just going to be talking about what Trump did or didn't do in Mar-a-Lago and other places, it gives the Democrats a good chance in November.
Exactly. Perhaps that was going to be my last question in terms of how Americans are divided on, the results, the FBI search in Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence, the Attorney General facing pressure to order the release of the arrest warrants, and, how this could impact the investigation into the classified documents found at his residence.
Well, I think that Americans are divided. I really hope, though, that this situation, in Mar-a-Lago with the documents that I understand there's a political dimension that we can't ignore, but I hope that the justice part of it is allowed to pursue, that if President Trump is guilty of something or needs to be charged, that he will be. And if he's not, that he won't, that this will not become a political maneuver. But like I said, in this environment, it's going to be hard. I just hope the Department of Justice just sticks to their investigation and isn't influenced one way or the other by political pressure.
And Adam, do you agree as well?
Well, I spent most of my career in the intelligence community and with the DOD. So I've had to go through the classification process of learning how the guidelines work, and the power of how these classification guidelines are passed down actually fall within the power of the president. So it's one of those cases where if Trump has, as what you call the original classification authority, which he is, he properly declassified information, or if he had classified information and he moved it to another classified facility during the time he was approved to do that. There's a lot of factors here that the Department of Justice will have to evaluate, but the biggest key factor here is that the president does have the authority as the ultimate original classification authority. It's called the OCA, under the guidelines of classifying documents. There's a lot of factors that have to be considered here. It is not just a simple raid into the Mar-a-Lago residence, but looking at presidential authorities and what documents were on the premise at Mar-a-Lago when they entered the residence.
Well, I'd like to appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Foreign Affairs commentator Calvin Dark, thank you. And Foreign Affairs strategy analyst Adam Roosevelt, thank you both for joining me on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Still ahead on The World Today. It allows the user to hold a glass, open a door, or pick up an egg. Still ahead, you'll see the British bionic hand now has new gestures added anytime, anywhere. Welcome back, and there's a lot going on in Kenya's political scene today. President-elect William Ruto says public expectations were huge and that there was no time to waste, having met with elected officials from his alliance earlier. Although his opponent Raila Odinga says he will challenge the result of the August 9 presidential election, Mr. Ruto says he is forging ahead with creating an administration and that no part of the country will be excluded regardless of political or ethnic affiliation.
I want to say that this afternoon to ask all of us as leaders in Kenya to learn from the people of Kenya who have settled on the issues. They now want us to deliver on the commitments that we gave the people of Kenya. And I want to say to this team that we do not have the luxury of time to waste. We even have a broader mandate because we have won 25% in 39 counties. That broader mandate comes with greater responsibility to every Kenyan. And that is why I want to say from the onset, there will be no room for exclusion of any part of the Republic of Kenya.
And he has been in the eye of the storm lately, but Australia's former Prime Minister Scott Morrison has defended his decision to secretly appoint himself into 5 key ministries during the pandemic and says he will not be resigning from federal parliament. Mr. Morrison, who stepped down as leader of the Liberal Party after losing a general election in May, addressed a news conference to answer a barrage of criticism from the Labour government and his own party over the unprecedented move. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said Morrison had attacked the Westminster system of government by secretly appointing himself to 5 portfolios, including Home Affairs, Treasury, Health, Finance and Resources between 2020 and 2021. 3 of the ministers said that they were unaware Morrison shared power over their ministries until the revelations this week. The Solicitor General will provide advice on the matter to Albanese next week, Monday.
The first rule of I believed it was necessary to have authority to have what were effectively emergency powers to exercise in extreme situations that would be unforeseen, that would enable me to act in the national interest. And that is what I did in a crisis. Those safeguards were put in place for precautionary, for prudent and responsible reasons. And I didn't consider it at the time, given everything else that was going on and the other priorities we were dealing with, that it was a matter that needed to be raised at that point, because if I needed to use the powers, then I would have disclosed them with the minister in particular. I'll come here.
Let's go over to Britain now, where Finance Minister Nadhim Zahawi says his department is working on options to help consumers meet rising energy costs, ready for the country's next Prime Minister to assess when the new leader is announced September 5. He said the Treasury was looking at what could be done in January, when further price rises are expected to come into effect and when already announced support packages have been fully implemented. Official figures show British consumer price inflation jumped to 10.1% in July, its highest since February 1982, up from an annual rate of 9.4% in June, intensifying the squeeze on households.
Yeah, very much so. This is a difficult time. There are no easy options. We see Putin deliberately use energy as a tool to get back at us for the help we're putting into Ukraine, and that is obviously impacting families because of energy costs, impacting families because of the cost of food, as we saw today with the inflation numbers. In a couple of months' time, everyone will see £400 off their energy bills. Of course, energy bills are rising. I recognise that. Those who need additional help will see more help through the Household Support Fund, which we're extending till March of next year, working with local authorities who know those families that need that additional help. And the other thing that I'm doing, that we're really focused on, is what more do we need to do for January? We prepare all the options ready for the incoming Prime Minister on the 5th September.
Well, let's bring you the weather situation in some parts of the globe where warnings have been issued instructing residents to stay indoors.
The U.S. government has warned that the need for water conservation was now drastic to protect dwindling reservoirs like Lake Mead from overuse and severe drought. That comes as the Bureau of Reclamation spared 7 western states from mandatory cutbacks. For now, officials extended the mid-August deadline for those states to reduce their usage of the Colorado River by an unprecedented 15 to 30%. The nation's southwest region has been suffering from a 23-year mega drought, the worst on record in at least 1,200 years. Lake Mead and Lake Powell are barely above 1/4 of their capacity. If they fall much lower, they will be unable to generate hydroelectric power for millions in the West. Meanwhile, Californians baked in heat wave on Tuesday with temperatures soaring above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, that is 37 degrees Celsius in parts of the state. In Livermore, just outside the San Francisco Bay Area, in what is now known as the Tri-Valley, temperatures hit 39.5 degrees Celsius. In the city's downtown area, kids played in water fountain as their parents cooled off in the shade.
So it's not hot at all, actually, if you're near a water fountain. But no, Livermore, you can't beat the heat. So we can get all the way up past 100, but today I think it's, 95, so we're not bad.
Well, we had to come out. We had business to take care of, but so we would not normally be out in it. We would just, unless we were in the water. Yeah, we would be in the house in this weather. We don't go out when it's this hot.
Over to the weather situation in Europe, where Spanish firefighters were seen running from a violent blaze as they scrambled to stop a wildfire from reaching a residential area in Beges in the Spanish region of Valencia. 2 firefighters were injured in the event. Although they had suffered burns, their life was not in danger. The wildfire started on Monday, and since then the villages of Teresa and Torres have been evacuated. In New Zealand's South Island today, torrential rains hit flooding rivers, houses and roads and forcing roughly 200 households to evacuate. Around 70 homes in Nelson at the north of the South Island and a further 140 homes on the west coast were evacuated, according to estimates by local news. In Paris, heavy rains caused flooding in metro stations. Social media video shows Victor Hugo metro station flooded with water running down platforms as passengers walked downstairs. The RATP transport organization says several metro stations in the city were inundated with water. The torrential rainfall came after a recent heat wave across France and Europe. Meteo France reported that the equivalent of 1 month's worth of rain fell in the space of 1 hour. The fire service issued warnings instructing residents to stay indoors as weather agencies continue to warn that the risks are still very high in the Mediterranean area.
And we end the bulletin today with a story that only warms the heart. And we're talking about one that also provides future solutions. The story of Australian swimmer Jessica Smith, who had an uneasy relationship with prosthetics since childhood. But now she gets to use something new. Bionic hands converts electrical impulses from the muscles in the upper arm into movement powered by motors in the hand. This would enable her or anyone using it to hold a glass, open a door, pick up an egg. Now she says the tech is not just changing her life, it's changing the lives of her 3 children.
Germany doesn't fail.
One more movement.
There might be times where it's a bit more emotional than it might be for somebody else, or just a different level of emotion. But thankfully, so far, none of that has been deterring in any way, and I'm just excited for the fact that the technology is so advanced, and I think that I was ready to try something like this.
How innovative. Well, that's our program this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Warcat.